Dad, how do you remember all these names every day? All of the doctors and nurses that come in. He said it's simple. They all wear name tags. 50 or so years ago, tragedy befell our family. Those of you who are old enough remember, those of you who are close enough were told. This man who lays before you saved our family from falling by the wayside. By standing up and being a man, he took the bull by the horns, stared devastation in the face, and put things back in order. Fortunately for all 6 of us, Dad included, 5 long years later, our lives will be sewn back together again by a very strong, loving person who respectfully and sincerely call Mom. He was one of the bravest persons you ever want to know. Being a fighter pilot in World War II was a walk in the park compared to raising 5 kids on your own. His biggest challenge was the fact that he was an airline pilot who took 4 to 5 day road trips. It was an inspiration to all who think they can't do it. But with true will and determination, you can succeed. Anything is possible. If I may quote a line from his favorite movie, Apollo 13, failure is not an option, not on my watch. He lived those words in the Navy as well as at home, always managing to get the job done. Born in 1925, he dealt with the Great Depression at age 4. His only saving grace was that he grew up with role models like Charles Lindbergh and Amelia Earhart. He knew at a very young age he wanted to fly. He dreamt of soaring like an eagle. He graduated high school at 16, spent 2 years at Oklahoma State, then at 18 years old, with the rest of his neighbors and countrymen, he enlisted in the military to defend our country during World War II. The Navy was where his dream became reality. He flew off aircraft carriers around Cuba and Guantanamo Bay. He loved telling the old flying stories about landing on the carrier with oil spewing out of his engine so bad he couldn't even find the carrier without looking out the side windows. Story of landing so hard on deck that he literally split the plane in half. Stories that he one time he couldn't land on board at all because he had a missing tail rotor. Somehow lost in a mid-air collision from a mock bombing run. Dad's tail rotor was gone and his buddy's right wing was damaged. After regaining control and realizing that landing on the carrier was no longer an option, they plotted a course to the nearest land base. He loved to tell you he was a flying ace, with 5 planes to his credit, followed by what they were all 5 American planes that he personally wrecked. The Navy taught him how to get the job done, how to be a team player, and how to be a decent family man. After the war, his flying skills brought him to North Dakota. That's where he prop dusted for a while, flying a bi-wing Stearman with a 55-gallon drum of insecticide as his co-pilot. They banned this stuff a few years ago, so they said it would kill you. Who knows? You would get every inch of those fields flying under power lines, spraying hedge to edge. Farmers loved them. September 1950, Fargo, North Dakota, is where oldest brother Bill was born. Missing his family is what ultimately brought him back to New York. It was 1951, I was born, and it was off to TWA. It was the early 1950s when Howard Hughes had taken over. Dad applied for and was accepted as a pilot for one of the biggest airlines at the time. 1953, they sent him to flying school over in Ypsilanti, Michigan, where Terry was born, and then back to settle in New York, where Ray and eventually Norman would be born. They flew props when he started back in the 50s, and slowly but surely, jets came on the scene. 35 years later, he retired a 747 captain. Our time growing up with him was limited to those 5-day layovers at home. He was, however, always the go-to guy. Dad, how do you change a fuse? Dad, how do you fix a car? Dad, how do you get from one place to another? We learned very quickly never to ask him for directions. because you had to wait for him to find the appropriate map, on which there were many, so we could show you precisely, turn by turn, where you had to go, and then repeat it until he thought you had it straight. Later on, however, was Dad, how do you shoot craps? That's where we always had fun, hanging at the craps table, bonding. You win some, you lose some. You would say, never take it personally, never show emotion, and most of all, learn from your mistakes. Never showing emotion was one of his strong points. Not until recently did we ever hear him say the love word. It was always implied but never said. It was that generation. Didn't make him a bad person, it just made him a commoner of his time. A man's true character comes out when the chips are down. You're going to play the hand you dealt, or you're going to drop out. He always played. He fought his way through a few hands, but he never dropped. October 1963, 50 or so years ago, was indeed a tragedy. Today is not a tragedy, it is indeed a celebration. A celebration of dedication for a life of valor, honor, and integrity. This was a man who fought for his country as well as his family. A man who would never let you down or ever let you go. A man who always seemed to know the answers. It's a celebration for the time we spent around him. A celebration for the privilege of knowing him. He was the truest of the true, the calmest of the calm, and the most honorable of us all. It was eerie the night Dad died. Right after hearing the news Wednesday, around 3 in the morning, a violent storm came through with rolling thunder and a downpour. I'm not nearly as spiritual as Dad was, but if I was, I'd say I was about as close as it gets to thinking that his world, the sky and the clouds, were coming together to crying one that was the pilot they would never get to embrace again. In a private moment at the hospital, when he knew he didn't have much longer, he said, tell the family, the whole family, kids, grandkids, and nieces and nephews, and tell everyone, thank you so much for the outpouring of love and support. He also told me one of the coolest stories I think I've ever heard. He said when you retire as an airline pilot, there's a tradition in place, whereby you pick your final and favorite destination. His was Kennedy to Cairo. It was much better back in the 80s. Much better. The tradition back in those days was to salute the captain on his final leg home. Upon leaving the tarmac at Cairo, he said the taxiway leading to the runway was lined with airport personnel from baggage handlers to ground crew to any and all available bodies, all standing there saluting him as he exited for his final leg home. Dad, hopefully they're all standing there now, saluting you as you take your final trip from here to eternity. I love you, Dad.